looking at the stock price earlier today, and it wasn't just $200 million that I said no to, it was actually $400 million.
This is Garry Tan, and he's about to tell us the story about how working at Microsoft cost him $400 million. It's okay, don't worry, he went on to do some pretty cool stuff, including being the first investor in Coinbase, but we're going to get to that. I also asked him questions like, tell me about the story from your first line of code to selling your first company for $20 million. I promise you're going to leave with some worldly wisdom if you can stick out the next 500 seconds for this exclusive interview that I did with Garry. He's going to share the first steps of how you can make the world's next billion-dollar company, and probably the most valuable lesson you can learn in life, which is you are capable of doing this too. Let me add some context. Garry's not some billionaire's son who woke up one day and was already successful. Years ago, he grew up without money, and he was a designer and a photographer. He went to a startup event called Startup School by Y Combinator, this random company you might have heard of, in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and this would go on to change his life and probably yours too. YC is the startup accelerator that incubated Airbnb, Reddit, Coinbase, Twitch, a huge number of incredibly successful companies. I asked Garry, who's now the CEO, to describe Y Combinator in 2 sentences.
Y Combinator is the one place where super smart technical people can come and get the money and the network and the know-how to go change the world. And that's really what YC is all about.
This photo was taken in 2008, and it shows Garry taking pictures at a YC event with Y Combinator's founder Paul Graham in the background. It's actually become quite famous in Silicon Valley. Seeing as, like I said, Garry is now the CEO of Y Combinator. Under Garry, YC is invested in some of the coolest startups changing the world, including mine and probably others too. Okay, I'm kidding. They actually invest in companies every year in 2 separate batches, and they invest in a lot of really cool companies.
YC has always had an acceptance rate of maybe between 1% and 2%. We're actually trending now to sub 1% at this point. But if you can be a part of that crazy 1%, being in that room with the most eminent, smartest people of your generation who are trying to start a startup, there's incredible value just in that. And that's actually my favorite thing about Y Combinator being back in person in San Francisco. I can now see all of the bonds that made YC great, over the course of 18 years. They're all back, and it's happening here, down the street from Cerebral Valley in San Francisco, California.
Now that you know all of this context, why was working at Microsoft such a detrimental decision to Garry, and why might it be one to you too? Well, let's get to it.
I had just graduated from computer systems engineering from Stanford, and I was working on Windows Mobile as a PM, and friends of mine started a company with Peter Thiel, but it wasn't even starting the company yet. It was more like, hey, we're not going to take jobs, and we're going to go work on this project for Peter Thiel. And Peter at the time was not sort of this like legendary billionaire. I don't think he was even a billionaire yet. He had sold PayPal at that point. But the interesting thing about PayPal, and the reason why the PayPal mafia is actually so powerful, is that PayPal did not make them enough money so that they stopped working. Peter said, what are you doing at Microsoft? You're wasting your life. Come join us. We're going to go change the world. And he said he was going to write me a check for $70,000 a year, which was actually what I made at Microsoft at the time. And the funny thing is, looking back on it, I had credit card debt. I had student loan debt at the time. Like, that was more money than had ever seen before. And I still said no, because I thought, well, my friends are unemployed and I have a real job and I have health insurance. And of course, the company turned out to be Palantir, and I did the math on it recently, looking at the stock price earlier today, and it wasn't just $200 million that I said no to, it was actually $400 million.
Like I said before, Garry is a great rags to riches story, so I asked him to explain his story of first line of code to selling his first company for $20 million, and this is what he said.
Picture this, it was 2007. I was actually sort of having a quarter-life crisis. I had just left Palantir. I actually had lost my belief in that previous startup that I had spent 2 years working on. I designed the logo. It was a Peter Thiel startup, but it was still actually many years away from even its first $1 million in revenue. So I was very impatient at the time, and as are many founders today. Shoot, maybe it doesn't work out. I better, go figure out what I really want to do in my life. I started DJing weddings, and I tried to become a hip-hop photographer. I got a job as a designer. It turns out that going from someone who does design engineering and, sort of engine management, to just doing design, it actually freed me up to try all these other things. And so in the evenings, a friend of mine started working on this side project. Both of us really loved photography, and both of us really loved blogging. And it was actually not even a startup idea yet. It was just, he worked on a Java app that would run on a server that would convert an email into a blog post on WordPress. And we thought, this is a fun piece of code. Like, we didn't know if it could be a startup, but we started working on a website. So rather than have it hook up to WordPress, we said we should make our own blog platform, and that turned into Posterous. And, I happened to be living right next to Y Combinator in Mountain View, and we applied and got an interview and moved to Cambridge, and we were sort of one of the last companies to go to Y Combinator while it was in Cambridge. And it was a very different time. They gave us only $12,000. And back then when you did YC, if you didn't raise money at demo day, you were done. Like, you were going to go get another job, or it just didn't work out. But we were lucky. I mean, we actually closed our seed round the day before Lehman Brothers died in 2008. That's also why our YC batch, summer of 2008, is the least successful YC batch that has ever existed. Really, really hard to raise money. And then, of course, the story is that if it's really hard to raise money, sometimes the best things come out of that. So the batch right after ours, Paul Graham, the creator of YC, said, we're not even sure if any investors will show up to invest in any YC company. So if you get into winter '09, you can defer it because we're not sure if there are going to be investors. But of course, Airbnb did that batch and it became a $100 billion company.
But wait, this is kind of reproducible. Garry is not a 1 in a billion story. YC actually gives people the opportunity to do this every single day. They give you $500,000 for about 7% of your company. They give you the best mentorship in the world from people that have already done this, and they give you access to this network of unbelievably impressive and helpful people. So, okay, sounds great. How do I actually get in? Well, I asked that to Garry too.
The amazing and sort of brilliant thing that Paul Graham figured out for Y Combinator is, first, it's actually really useful for the companies that go through it to be funded in a batch. So you have literally hundreds of other people who are all trying to do exactly the same thing that you're doing. But then the other thing that really powers it is the application process.
I asked him then, what makes a good YC application?
What I really like when we see a good YC app is that it's very plain spoken. It's actually insightful. It actually teaches us something. And then they just try to be themselves, actually.
Okay, after the application process, what is the interview process like?
The interview is the true litmus test of whether or not someone can very clearly explain to people, well, what problem are you trying to solve? Is the product good or not? And then are you the team to actually bring it to the world? And so what we're really looking for is just very, very clear clarity of thought. And honestly, some of it is a vibe. Some of it is actually just literally, what's it going to be like to work with this person, for maybe years? Like, will I be excited to get a call at 6 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday because something went wrong and they need help? And the ones that do really well at YC or get into YC, those are sort of the people that we really want to help. Like, it's sort of a two-way street that way. And so it is like dating a little bit. It's a lot like trying to pick the people you're going to spend time with over the next 5 or 10 years. And so that's how it feels on the YC partner side.
Lastly, who should apply to YC?
Actually, a community that is accepting of really any kind of builder. Some people like to think, I'm too early for YC. And I think what we've learned is actually, we don't want that to ever be true. Some of the people who are the most successful at YC, they might have applied 2 or 3 times. And one of the things that we do is look at the difference between, the first application versus the second or the third. And one of the most impressive things to us is that, when we can see, every 6 months, someone comes back, but they figured out more, they've changed, they've sort of validated things, and that actually helps us a lot. I think the first thing is, don't be discouraged if you don't get in. It is really, really, really hard. And then on the other hand, you don't have to have a specific background. You don't have to really have, a specific resume or, we just love people who can build. And my favorite thing when reading YC applications is clicking on the demo video, because, even beyond a resume, that to me is the most important thing. Great builders come from every walk of life, and we can really tell that from the demos.
Garry has his own YouTube channel, and I recommend going to subscribe to that, Garry Tan, also Y Combinator's YouTube channel. You'll get more value from those 2 YouTube channels than honestly the rest of YouTube combined. Make sure to apply for the next batch, and if you don't get in, well, apply again.